Alright, we're going to continue with different symbols and what do they mean on patterns. So, anyway, next on the line of patterns here is dots. Now, dots are another thing that you use to line up stuff. A lot of times they are used to tell you where you have to put like pocket flaps or pockets themselves, things like that. If you don't think you're going to be putting pockets on something, you should still mark the dots on your fabric anyway. For instance, in this bag pattern, there are a couple little dots here, and these kind of tell you, these kind of line up with the dots on the bottom piece here. See? Again, you're dealing with something that's going to be wrapping a three-dimensional object, and they put in all these markings so that you can do that with the least amount of pain. So, these dots will line up with these dots on the bottom, which sounds kind of crazy right now, but I assure you, it will work. So, the most obvious of the things are the cutting line. And that's just any major solid line that you have. That's what you're going to be cutting along. Unless the pattern specifies that it has a seam allowance in it, you're not going to be cutting right along that line. You're going to be giving it a little extra. This is about 5/8 of an inch, which is the standard seam allowance. If you are worried that the fit of your garment may be a little small, it's good to give it maybe, say, a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That way you can always take out the seams a little bit. A lot of older garments will give a larger seam allowance because they expected the garment to be around for a long time, and if you needed to do alterations in the future, they wanted you to be able to take it out a little. If you're not particularly worried about that, then just go with the standard seam allowance. But whenever I first started sewing, I made big seam allowances because I was worried. But you don't have to do that. The other symbol is called lengthening or shortening lines. Alright, now this is important if you happen to be petite or tall, because most patterns are assuming that you fall under a certain specific ratio. Like, for instance, a semi-tall hourglass figure, I think, is kind of what they base most of it off of. I'm not an hourglass. I'm a pretty, straight figure. So I'm always taking things in the hips and the bust. But, I don't have to shorten my pants, though, at least, which is nice. But a lot of people will find that the patterns for pants are, a little bit long or stuff like that. So they give you double lines, which kind of tell you, hey, this is where you want to fold up to shorten or lengthen the pants within a certain area so that it doesn't look weird, basically. It keeps the standard line of the garment, but it adjusts it properly for your figure. They have a shortening, lengthening line up here as well. So that's if you're short-waisted or, long-waisted, you can expand out from here or shorten from there. It's kind of nice. So that is basically all the symbols I have on that garment. Let's see, other things you should know. If you'll notice in a lot of the drawings, they will show you kind of basically where you should be notching if it's something curved. When in doubt, add more notches. That way it'll lay better. Excuse me. Try to find patterns, if you can, that have a lot of pictures. I know Vogue patterns tend to have a lot of directions and pictures, but, you know, they also have a lot more complicated garments a lot of the time. So that's why I've been using Simplicity, because they just have simpler garments. At least when I started. Again, your mileage may vary on that. Something else that you should probably pay attention to. Sometimes they will tell you to do certain types of stitches. What I basically have done anytime I don't recognize a stitch is I just Google it. And I usually find about 5 different videos of somebody showing me the stitch or directions and things like that. I would go through each of them, but that's kind of boring. So, you know, just use your brain with that. If you don't know what a word means, it's not cheating to go look it up. Believe me, I've had to do that a lot. I mean, I think a lot of patterns do a pretty good job of showing you how things are supposed to go together. It may confuse you at first, where you have to kind of like, again, it's the whole 2D to 3D thing. This is why it's kind of important, if you get into sewing a lot, to use a mannequin, because you can put something together, drape it on your mannequin, and see if it looks right or not. If it doesn't look right, I mean, you can do the same thing by trying it on yourself. Just be aware if it's pinned and stuff, you may poke yourself. So be careful, please. I mean, the important thing with most patterns, I think the most important thing, is to take your time, admit when you're confused by something, and go seek out sources that can explain something to you. I mean, I hope that these little videos have helped somewhat. I mean, I think a lot of what I deal with patterns is kind of common sense and kind of trial and error. So, if you're really, really worried, it's good to, people call this making a muslin, which is basically a kind of a crappier fabric version of your garment. This is good if you are kind of a non-standard size and you want to make sure something will fit properly based on the pattern that you're dealing with. So what you do is you get some crappy fabric, like old sheets work really well as muslin, and you know, cut it out, assemble it, and try it on and see, oh, you know, maybe I need to take in the waist, or oh, maybe I need to expand something here, this is way too small. These are things that are good to do with fabric that, you know, doesn't cost a lot. But, again, your mileage may vary. I don't tend to do muslins, but that's probably because, you know, I'm weird, so. Anyway, but that is my little talk on patterns, which took up 2 videos, because I have a tendency to ramble. I hope I've at least explained some basics. If you have more questions, just, you know, feel free to comment, and I'll try to explain something as best I can. Bye.